Hey, this is Ralph, and in this video I want to finish up working on this web page mockup. Okay, so we are working on this web page mockup. Here's kind of a finished sample here where we have large background image that moves and scrolls, header and secondary nav stays fixed, but then later on we have some content with fixed background images which stay stationary as the user scrolls through. Here's our page now. So far we've just done the top part, and of course you can look in the video description to get a hyperlink to my demo page. Okay, so I've already got the HTML set up for all of these parts, and basically it's right around here. The last things were the main content and stuff. So I'm looking at this reimagine area, which is basically going to be this block here with the dark gray and the light gray, and then we have all these other sections. So let's go ahead and start to style these particular elements. I'll just move up to my internal styles. Now I'm going to start off with my section called Reimagine. I'm going to just give it a min height of 800 pixels just to give it some structure because I don't really have any content in there. And then I'm going to go ahead and take, because I have a top portion, set a height of that of 400 pixels. Give this one a lighter gray. Takes care of those. Now I have several elements that have the class BGIMG for big image. So I've got multiple elements that are going to be classed with big image because I want them to have some similar characteristics. Those sections, I'll use a background size of cover and a background attachment of fixed. That's the key step right there. I'll go ahead and set their heights too. I'll do about 420 pixels. Now for the individual background images, I'll set those where necessary. As a quick example, one of my elements also has class equals wine. So for instance, this particular element has class equals BG image, background image, and also class equals wine. Two classes for one element, class name separated by a space. It simply has that particular background image for wine. Let's save that, see how it looks. So here's my page as it stands. I can't even scroll on it. Go ahead and refresh. And now I can start to scroll. And you'll start to appreciate that my header is fixed and my secondary nav is fixed. Now I notice as I scroll, notice that my content is actually moving on top of the header. Let's go ahead and fix that real quick while I notice it. So I'm going to move up to the style for my header. It is position fixed. I'm going to put a big Z index on it. I'll just put 10. Refresh. There we go. So now those elements will go behind that header. Z index controls the layering of positioned elements. Bigger the number, more on top it is. Okay. And we can also start to appreciate the fixed background image that appears. So I've got this large section. And I do see that I've got looks like a little mild flaw in here, but I look over at my CSS and I forgot to separate my CSS declarations with semicolons. Save that, browser refresh, there we go. So there's those dark gray portions. So that is really the gist of what we're trying to accomplish with fixed backgrounds. Let me go and do a little bit more work for the other parts of this page. Okay, so I've just put in the CSS for the other elements, and for the most part they're the same that I've done before. So I've set some background colors and some min heights for content that it was just a large blank section. I want you to kind of ignore the interiors for a moment. And of course for other elements I've set height and put in some background images where necessary. Now for the interiors part, I want to use a little flexbox. This is going to have these three divs side by side, and if you recall on my HTML, it's right in here. So the web page that I'd like to create has a section where there's some promo items or something like that, three box elements side by side. So what I'd like to finish off with is taking care of that. Now if I refresh my page, Everything's looking pretty good with my background images. Kind of ignore those interior sections. So there's all of the parts, including the footer. Now, let's check this out. I've got this one section, and ultimately, I want to get these boxes side by side nicely on the page. Div elements are blocks, so naturally they are one on top of the other, and I put a big red border around the parent container and yellow borders around these child elements so that we can see them very clearly. Let's go up to the CSS and work on that. So there's my red bordered parent, and then my child elements are the divs within that parent. So I'm using a child selector there, the immediate child div within the interior section. So what I want to do with this interior section is I'm going to do a display flex. That's going to make this parent container into a flexbox container. I'm going to use the flex flow property, and I'm going to set them to row and wrap. Row definitely is going to be useful. That's going to get these elements side by side, these child elements side by side. And wrap isn't really going to affect us here, but basically if the page got too narrow, they would go back to one on top of the other. And I'm also going to do a justify content center. So that'll center these three divs side by side. That's going on the flexbox container. Justify content. I'm also going to put a little margin on this. I will do 80 pixels top and bottom and just 0 left and right. Now just doing that alone, putting display flex on an element, a parent element, should have a pretty noticeable impact. So now I can see that those three boxes are side by side exactly how I might want. And if I got rid of the borders, things would start to look a lot better. So I will get rid of that red border and get rid of the yellow border. Save that, browser refresh, and now I've got my containers, or my three child containers at least, side by side where I could start to put in their own background images or calls to action and whatnot. And that is going to conclude our web page mockup. So there's our sample with fixed backgrounds, a little bit of flexbox, and some position fixed for certain elements. And of course the original was this the Alexander Bend, a retirement community, and there's their version. And I think we've created a pretty nice example to kind of mimic this, and of course put in our own text content, our own images, and away we go. So I hope you enjoyed this, and definitely check out the video description if you need to see a sample of the markup and the CSS used to create this page. Talk to you later.